counting downwards from the chin, and pouring his reply into his ear. 'Sir,' whispered John with dignity, 'I know my duty. We want no love making here, sir, unbeknown to parents. I respect a certain young gentleman, taking him in the light of a young gentleman. I respect a certain young lady, taking her in the light of a young lady. But of the two, as a couple, I have no knowledge, sir, none whatever. My son, sir, is upon his patrole.' 'I thought I saw him looking through the corner window but this moment,' said Mr Chester, who naturally thought that being on patrol implied walking about somewhere.
'No doubt you did, sir,' returned John. 'He is upon his patrole of honour, sir, not to leave the premises. Me and some friends of mine that use the Maypole of an evening, sir, considered what was best to be done with him, to prevent his doing anything unpleasant in opposing your desires, and we've put him on his patrole. And what's more, sir, he won't be off his patrole for a pretty long time to come, I can tell you that.'
When he had communicated this bright idea, which had its origin in the perusal by the village cronies of a newspaper, containing, among other matters, an account of how some officer, pending the sentence of some court-martial, had been enlarged on parole, Mr Willet drew back from his guest's ear, and without any visible alteration of feature, chuckled thrice audibly. This nearest approach to a laugh in which he ever indulged, and that but seldom and only on extreme occasions, never even curled his lip, or effected the smallest change in, no, not so much as a slight wagging of, his great fat double chin, which at these times, as at all others, remained a perfect desert in the broad map of his face, one changeless, dull, tremendous blank. Lest it should be matter of surprise to any that Mr Willet adopted this bold course in opposition to one whom he had often entertained, and who had always paid his way at the Maypole gallantly, it may be remarked that it was his very penetration and sagacity in this respect which occasioned him to indulge in those unusual demonstrations of jocularity just now recorded. For Mr Willet, after carefully balancing father and son in his mental scales, had arrived at the distinct conclusion that the old gentleman was a better sort of a customer than the young one. Throwing his landlord into the same scale, which was already turned by this consideration, and heaping upon him again his strong desires to run counter to the unfortunate Joe, and his opposition as a general principle to all matters of love and matrimony, it went down to the very ground straightway, and sent the light cause of the younger gentleman flying upwards to the ceiling. Mr Chester was not the kind of man to be by any means dim-sighted to Mr Willet's motives, but he thanked him as graciously as if he had been one of the most disinterested martyrs that ever shone on earth, and leaving him with many complimentary reliances on his great taste and judgment, to prepare whatever dinner he might deem most fitting the occasion, bent his steps towards the Warren. Dressed with more than his usual elegance, assuming a gracefulness of manner which, though it was the result of long study, sat easily upon him and became him well, composing his features into their most serene and prepossessing expression, and setting in short that guard upon himself at every point which denoted that he attached no slight importance to the impression he was about to make, he entered the bounds of Miss Haredale's usual walk. He had not gone far, or looked about him long, when he descried coming towards him a female figure. A glimpse of the form and dress as she crossed a little wooden bridge which lay between them, satisfied him that he had found her whom he desired to see. He threw himself in her way, and a very few paces brought them close together. He raised his hat from his head, and yielding the path, suffered her to pass him. Then, as if the idea had but that moment occurred to him, he turned hastily back, and said in an agitated voice, 'I beg pardon. Do I address Miss Haredale?' She stopped in some confusion at being so unexpectedly accosted by a stranger, and answered, 'Yes.' 'Something told me,' he said, looking a compliment to her beauty, 'that it could be no other. Miss Haredale, I bear a name which is not unknown to you, which it is a pride and yet a pain to me to know sounds pleasantly in your ears. I am a man advanced in life, as you see. I am the father of him whom you honour and distinguish above all other men. May I, for weighty reasons which fill me with distress, beg but a minute's conversation with you here?' Who that was inexperienced in deceit, and had a frank and youthful heart, could doubt the speaker's truth? Could doubt it, too, when the voice that spoke was like the faint echo of one she knew so well, and so much loved to hear? She inclined her head, and stopping, cast her eyes upon the ground. 'A little more apart, among these trees. It is an old man's hand, Miss Haredale, an honest one, believe me.' She put hers in it as he said these words, and suffered him to lead her to a neighbouring seat. 'You alarm me, sir,' she said in a low voice. 'You are not the bearer of any ill news, I hope?' 'Of none that you anticipate,' he answered, sitting down beside her. 'Edward is well, quite well. It is of him I wish to speak, certainly, but I have no misfortune to communicate.' She bowed her head again, and made as though she would have begged him to proceed, but said nothing. 'I am sensible that I speak to you at a disadvantage, dear Miss Haredale. Believe me that I am not so forgetful of the feelings of my younger days, as not to know that you are little disposed to view me with favour. You have heard me described as cold-hearted, calculating, selfish.' 'I have never, sir,' she interposed with an altered manner and a firmer voice, 'I have never heard you spoken of in harsh or disrespectful terms. You do a great wrong to Edward's nature, if you believe him capable of any mean or base proceeding.' 'Pardon me, my sweet young lady, but your uncle—' 'Nor is it my uncle's nature either,' she replied, with a heightened colour in her cheek. 'It is not his nature to stab in the dark, nor is it mine to love such deeds.' She rose as she spoke, and would have left him, but he detained her with a gentle hand, and besought her in such persuasive accents to hear him but another minute, that she was easily prevailed upon to comply, and so sat down again. 'And it is,' said Mr Chester, looking upward and apostrophising the air, 'it is this frank, ingenuous, noble nature, Ned, that you can wound so lightly. Shame! Shame upon you, boy!' She turned towards him quickly, and with a scornful look and flashing eyes. There were tears in Mr Chester's eyes, but he dashed them hurriedly away, as though unwilling that his weakness should be known, and regarded her with mingled admiration and compassion. 'I never until now,' he said, 'believed that the frivolous actions of a young man could move me like these of my own son. I never knew till now the worth of a woman's heart, which boys so lightly win and lightly fling away. Trust me, dear young lady, that I never until now did know your worth, and though an abhorrence of deceit and falsehood has impelled me to seek you out, and would have done so had you been the poorest and least gifted of your sex, I should have lacked the fortitude to sustain this interview, could I have pictured you to my imagination, as you really are.' Oh, if Mrs Varden could have seen the virtuous gentleman as he said these words, with indignation sparkling from his eyes; if she could have heard his broken, quavering voice; if she could have beheld him as he stood bareheaded in the sunlight, and with unwonted energy poured forth his eloquence. With a haughty face, but pale and trembling too, Emma regarded him